This here is a tale from a collection of short stories titled Night Terrors. This tale is called The Vanishing, Thomas Marvin. I started working for the old man back in the summer of 1992. He lived down the hill from us and was only a short bike ride from my house. I had turned 13 that spring and was thinking of starting a grass cutting business in the summer. That was before Thomas Marvin offered me good pay to help him and his wife tend to things around their house. They were both in their early 80s and were having trouble doing the things they used to. I talked to my parents about the old man's offer. They both thought it'd be wise to take the old man up on the job. That simple decision has forever changed my life. Thomas Marvin owned over 160 acres, 53 of it being old tobacco farms. He and his wife Gloria had made their living 40 years harvesting tobacco in those fields. Together, they ran a company which at one point employed about a dozen or more people. The old man was smart with his money and had invested wisely through the years. He understood the pros and cons of debt and interest and learned to use them both in his favor. He respected every penny that was made and was always sure to put it to good use. When he and Gloria retired from the tobacco business, they leased 80 acres of the land to a local hunting club. The back portion of the land was a mixture of wetlands and hardy pines, which made it perfect hunting grounds. The land was plentiful with ducks, hogs, deer, and bear. The hunting club was happy to pay a premium for the prized land. At one point, they even offered a 7-figure deal to buy it from him outright. The old man refused the offer. I learned a lot from the old man for the 4 years I worked for him. He was always telling me tips and secrets about money and investing. Half of the time, his words were gibberish as I had trouble understanding his train of thought. As I've gotten older, though, I've realized just how smart the old rascal really was. The first summer I worked for him, he paid me $3 an hour, plus an extra 20 a week. I read an hour of the Wall Street Journal each morning. Now, at first, I thought any man who wanted to read or listen to an hour of the Wall Street Journal had to already have one foot in the insane asylum. But the more I read of it, the less I came to loathe it. After the first month of reading to him for an hour each morning, I actually began understanding some of the things he was talking about. Of course, Tom explained a lot of things along the way. He was Tom to me. He always stressed I just call him Tom. He didn't like me to call him Mr. Marvin or Thomas. Gloria could call him Thomas, but not me. Tom was what he preferred. Summer came and went in a flash. My parents were happy I'd found something I enjoyed doing and was able to make some decent money doing it. The way we all figured, another 2 summers like the first, and I could buy my first car soon after I got my license. The summer of '93 rolled around, and Tom bumped my pay to $3.50 an hour, plus an extra $25 a week for reading a journal to him each morning. He even offered a $100 bonus at the end of the summer if I helped him finish painting his barn and repair a few slats in his privacy fence beside Pam Rogers, their neighbor. It was a few weeks before I went back to school for the fall, and Tom mentioned the idea he had of buying a few milk cows to graze in a section of the old tobacco field. He planned to till up the dead plants with his tractor and throw down some grass seed in hopes of making a 2-acre pasture for the cows. He even had plans to build a new barn. He said Gloria had grown up on the farm and had always wanted cows and chickens and such. The way he figured, with the price of milk and eggs the way it was, sounded like a good opportunity to please the wife and save a few bucks while he's at it. I remember he snickered and elbowed me in the ribs when he told me that. "The way I see it, kid, you'll have more work than you know what to do with next summer. If you'll help a feller out with it, I'll be willing to bump you pay to $4 an hour, plus 30 a week for reading a journal to me. What'd you say? Sound square enough for you?" He said with an outstretched hand. I didn't even have to think about it. I nodded and shook his hand faster than a rabbit on crack. It was when he got the cows that things started getting weird. Me, a few of my buddies from school, and an old colored feller man who Tom had known since the Army, built the barn and redid a section of his tobacco field early that summer. Once we were finished, Tom went to a cattle auction somewhere down in Chester, South Carolina, and bought 4 milk cows. He had them delivered the next day. Gloria had named them Betsy, Bertha, Brenda, and Bonnie. Why they all had to start with a B, I never did understand, but that was their names. I remember Charles, the old colored man, laughed and laughed when he heard Gloria rattle off each of their names. "You folk crack me up, I kid you not," he had said. A few weeks after they got the cows, we received a phone call from Tom around 2 in the morning. My dad was the one who answered it, as all we had back then was a landline. I heard him fumble his way into the kitchen, flick on the light, and lift the phone out of his cradle. My dad's voice was thick with gravel, and I could just picture him standing there shirtless in his boxers, rubbing his eyes trying to figure out who in the world was calling at 2 in the morning. "You said what now? People are in your field? Who is this?" By then, I crawled out of bed and was coming down the hall. "Who?" "Thomas. Thomas Marvin?" I entered the kitchen the same time my mother did. She stood in the arch of the hallway, tying a knot in her robe. She squinted at my dad and mouthed, "What's wrong?" Dad shrugged his shoulders. "Well, what are they doing?" "What? How many are they?" "Oh my goodness." His voice trailed off. I could hear a voice on the other end, but couldn't make out the words. I heard a pop sound and saw my dad flinch before pulling the phone from his ear and staring at it for a short moment. "What was that?" I asked him. "Sounded like a gunshot." Then into the phone. "Thomas, are you all right? Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?" I heard 2 more shots before his voice came back. I watched as my dad stood there listening, making odd faces. "Have you called the cops?" Mom said, "Is he okay? What's going on over there?" My dad shook his head and held up a hand. "Yeah, okay, well, they shouldn't bother you no more. Sounds like it's probably some teenagers messing with you. Me and Derek will come by tomorrow and check on things with you." All right, Mr. Marvin, you be careful now. We'll see you tomorrow." "All right, bye." "Is everything all right? What's going on?" my mama asked as I was about to do the same. Dad looked at the floor, sighed, and shook his head. "Lord have mercy, that old fart is losing his mind." "What is it?" "He said there's a bunch of lights down in the field where the cows are at. Said he heard them mooing and calling and stir. He got up and said he heard a bunch of voices and saw lights flickering on and off. Said everything disappeared when he fired his shotgun in there. Tried saying he saw lights in the trees and stuff too." Dad looked at me and said, "Has he ever talked that strange around you before?" "No, I've never heard him talk like that. Something had to get him stirred up." I told him we'd come by tomorrow to help him look around. Said he didn't want to call the sheriff. Said he just wanted us to know in case they tried fooling around up here." My mama added, "Well, that's awfully odd for him to call like that. I hope he's not coming down with dementia or nothing. I know Gloria had told me the other week about how forgetful he's becoming." "Oh, Lord, don't say that," my dad had said. We went back to bed, and the next morning, which happened to be a Saturday, my mama cooked a good breakfast of liver mush and eggs before we all headed over to Tom and Gloria's. We tried knocking on the front door, which was open except for the storm door. After not getting an answer, my mom opened the door and poked her head inside. She called out for him, but there was never a returning voice. I remember saying, "I bet he's in his field." My dad said, "He's probably right. Come on, honey, let's look around back." Mama stepped off the porch and joined me and Dad as we rounded the corner of the house. Now, off in the distance near the back corner of Tom's field, I noticed 2 people standing there. I could barely make them out, but him and Gloria were looking at something on the ground. There were 2 large black mounds resting forward. "Hank, is that what I think it is?" my mama had asked. Dad grunted and squinted his eyes. He shielded the sun with his hand. He grumbled a curse under his breath. "Who would do such a thing? Are they dead, Hank? Oh, I hope they're not dead." Dad shook his head and said, "I don't know. those cows sure ain't moving. As we drew closer, Tom and Gloria spotted us. Tom was holding a straw hat in his hand and waved in the air when he saw us. Gloria stood next to him with her arms crossed. She wore a long khaki skirt and a baby blue blouse. Her silver hair was tied into a tight bun. Tom had his hands to his hips and studied the sight before him. He tightened his lips and peeked up at us as we approached. "What in the world happened, Tom?" Dad had asked. The old man shook his head. "I knew I should have came down here to check on him last night. Gloria was afraid one of them people would get me. I told her I liked my chances with a scattergun." He paused and sighed before adding, "I ain't never seen nothing like this before. I've grown up around cattle most of my life. I've seen what happens when a coyote or a big cat gets a hold of one of them. But this..." His words trailed off as he pointed down at the cow's face. We were standing behind the animal and couldn't see the face or belly all that good. But when we stepped around to see what Tom was talking about, I remember feeling like my heart had taken a shock from a cattle prod. The majority of the flesh around Brenda's face had been stripped away to leave a bloody, grinning skull. I could see her tongue had been cut in half, her eyes bulged like two ping pong balls. Scanning down her body, I saw her gut had a round hole which had been sliced with perfect precision. Her udder was missing, and her blue, gray intestines lay spewed on the ground. A pungent odor hung in the air. Despite the gore, I couldn't see a drop of blood anywhere. My mama gasped and covered her mouth before turning away. "My God, what in the world?" Dad said as he scrunched his face at the sight and looked at Tom for answers. Tom shook his head and pointed his hat to the other cow lying lifeless about 10 yards from us. "Bonnie's the same way. I had to lock Betsy and Bertha in the barn. Kept hanging around and nudging them. Those poor things moaned and groaned like people grieving at a funeral or something." Gloria sniffled and said, "I told Tom I wanted to get some cameras set up so we can watch whoever did this. These poor cows didn't deserve this. People are evil nowadays." Mama came back to us and added, "You need to call the sheriff so they can file a report." Tom tightened his lips and grunted. "Sheriff will just laugh at us. That sorry rascal will try saying Bear did it or something." Gloria's right. We need cameras so we can have proof of who's messing around. My dad spoke up and said, "Well, me and Derek can help you put them up, mister." Tom looked at me and Dad and said, "Really? I sure appreciate it. I don't know the first thing about today's technology." A few days later, after Tom used his tractor to bury Brenda and Bonnie, me and Dad helped set the cameras up for him. My mom found an 8-camera system at Radio Shack that came with a DVR box and monitor. It took us 2 hours one evening to get it all set up, but it was worth it. We placed the monitor on a desk next to the living room so the two of them could keep a check on it as they watched their nightly TV shows. We had 4 cameras stationed at each corner of the house, with the other 4 pointing towards the barn, field, and tool shed. As much as we thought we were helping at the time, I kind of think those cameras may have been a mistake, because that was when the old man's paranoia really began. His late night calls became a weekly routine after that. He'd call swearing up and down somebody's messing around in his house. He'd call cussing up a storm, saying he saw lights on the camera and heard people in his field. We'd go over there the next day to run the cameras back, but we'd never find anything more than dust orbs or bugs floating by. That summer ended without further incident. I went back to school to start my sophomore year at Clover High. Kids at school had somehow heard about the deaths of Tom's 2 cows, and boy, did the rumor spread. My buddies would often greet me in the hallway wearing hats covered in tinfoil. I heard whispers about everything from aliens, the CIA, Bigfoot, satanic cult, you name it. How people found out about those cows, I never understood. I guess that's the works of living in a small town, though. I sometimes wonder if maybe the culprits even attended my school. I went back to work that summer, and after only a week on Tom's farm, I found Gloria lying in the field, naked and lifeless. It was at dawn, and Tom had driven into town to gather supplies for another fence wearer to build. Gloria had fixed breakfast as always, and the two enjoyed a meal together before starting their day. Her official cause of death was ruled a heart attack. Despite her nakedness, there was no indication of foul play. As strange as it all was, it looked like she had simply stepped out of the shower and walked into the field before her heart gave out on her. The bathroom mirror was still damp with moisture, and water droplets led from the shower to the back deck. A bath towel was found 20 feet from her body. It appeared something had drawn her out to the field. But what was it? Had she heard something? Still to this day, no one has ever learned the truth behind Gloria's death. The tragic event only added to Tom's already fragile mental state. The man became a recluse after her death. My parents and I did our best to be there for him, but his behavior became creepy and unpredictable. He talked non-stop about people wandering in his field at night, seeing strange lights again, and hearing voices calling to him late into the night. I'll never forget the night he called and said people were in his house.